Dearest Queers, good morning, happy Monday. I'm Doolin, I'm a healer and mentor, and I work with queer and trans folks struggling with feelings of disconnection and loneliness, helping them to talk about strategies for connection and how to live their best relational lives. I bring a trauma-informed lens with a spiritual slant, and I've missed you all so much. I was just looking back last night as I was preparing for this morning that August 3rd was the last time that I have been live with you all. I took a week of vacation, much needed vacation. And then last week did the first live question with Dylan for the episode. And so if you missed that episode, I highly recommend it. It's very good. It was exciting to talk to someone in the moment about their question. So that was last week's episode 8. So I encourage you to check that out if you haven't seen it. Here we are at the 9th episode of Dearest Queers. This is a live series inspired by questions that you all submitted to me. So your questions that I'm answering about experiences around loneliness and disconnection. So this week's question is less of there are questions embedded within it, but it is a statement that I received, which is that this person, I'm tired and lonely and therefore short-tempered, and I'm embarrassed about that. So help, can you help with that? And so the person who wrote this, I just want to say that I see you and I love you, and all of that sounds really painful. So let's talk about it a little bit. So even though it is a statement, I think that there are a couple of questions that reside within that statement, which is, how do I feel less lonely and tired and short-tempered? And then I don't feel embarrassed about that. And then also, can I be a hot mess and still be loved? Am I still lovable for that? So the very short answer to the second part of the question is absolutely. And so let's talk about the first part of the statement or the question a little bit. So you said that you're feeling tired and lonely. So it sounds to me like a very simple solution to that would be to get some rest and connection. And I'm not minimizing that in any way, but that sort of seems like the simple way out of that, or to how to address that. And if those things don't feel simple to access, why not? And what's going on there? I'd had some curiosity about that. I'm guessing that things are a little deeper than that, which is why I chose this question and why we're going to talk about this. So it's really good insight. I just want to say that feeling tired and lonely are contributing to you being short-tempered, right? So I know that when I'm feeling irritable or quick to anger, that often it's because I have a need that is going unmet. And so, so if your need for rest or for connection are going unmet, that makes sense that it's feeding into you, being more quick to anger or irritable with folks. And so sometimes that can be just as simple as taking a nap or having a snack or having a good laugh with a friend. And then sometimes it's deeper than that, and I need to tend emotionally to myself in some way. There's some emotional need that's being stirred up that wants some love and attention. And so you mentioned being tired and lonely, so I'm wondering if there's some emotional needs loneliness that need some tending from you in all of this. And my first question to you would be how do you feel about your loneliness? And that is a question both for the asker and for everyone watching this. So when loneliness comes up for you, how do you respond to it, and how do you feel about it? So I wrote a post last week where I talked about how much shame I used to have for how consistently lonely I felt during my life, and that it felt really hard to name that, both the loneliness and then the shame I carried about that. And that's what shame does, right? It keeps us isolated. But in all of that, I felt a lot of brokenness around my loneliness, that there was something wrong with me in that. And so I don't know for sure, because I just have the question that you submitted, but I'm guessing that because you feel embarrassed by your short-temperedness, which you're attributing to the loneliness, is that you also have some judgment about the loneliness, right? So that if you didn't feel lonely, if only you just didn't feel lonely, you wouldn't be short-tempered as well. And so tying those things together. And so there's judgment about the loneliness and how it's making you show up in your other relationships. So if that's the case, then the first step is to love up on those feelings of loneliness, right? And so to let yourself feel the pain of that separation, and just let it sort of feel how deep it cuts and how uncomfortable. Right, this is the not fun part that folks don't want to do, is that making space for these feelings. And also, as we wade into the feelings, really watch the stories that come up, right? So that we can, right, they say that emotions flow through in 90 seconds. So if we can let the loneliness sort of flow through without getting caught up or attaching any narrative to it. So contrary to what might come up, is that it's not your fault. You're not broken. You didn't do anything to deserve feeling lonely. And here loneliness is. So love it, love yourself in it, because it wants your attention. It's it's here for a reason. So then once we like sit with that and acknowledge that, right, then there's that piece about connection, so the need that is going unmet. So what kinds and types of connection are you wanting right now? And like, how do you want to feel? Like, what is it like? How does it feel to be connected, or to feel safe in that, or to feel seen? Like, what are you wanting to feel out of your connection with folks? And then, like, yeah, let's talk about that. Let's get really clear about what you're wanting to feel, what you're wanting, because I'm telling you that even in a pandemic right now, that you can have the support and connection that you like fully desire. But like moving in a place of like action because you don't want to feel lonely is different than like acknowledging and loving the loneliness for yourself and then taking sort of like inspired or wise action from that place after knowing what it is that you want and desire and want to feel. So that's the loneliness piece. Let's like shift into talking about the embarrassment that's coming up too, about being short-tempered and how that's impacting the people that you care about. So this all boils down to self-compassion and self-forgiveness. And also just a real reminder that like you get to be human right now, having complex and painful and really hard feelings during a time full of massive uncertainty and change, where like many of us, all of us, are being tried and tested in ways that like we couldn't have even dreamt of. We had no idea that 2020 would unfold in this way. So here are all of these things. Like you get to be human in that. You get to like be having a hard time. And like we're still accountable for our behavior and its impact on others. So I can tell you that, you know, your embarrassment about how you're reacting, like, and then your subsequent desire to like shut yourself in your room and isolate because of that, like, that's not going to help the short-temperedness or the loneliness, which I'm like sorry to be the bearer of that news. So let's like talk some real talk about what is happening and lay out all the details. So you told me that you were tired and you're lonely. Now you're short-tempered, and that is causing you to like be reactive and hurtful to those that you care about. And then you feel embarrassed about that, and then you want to isolate. So those are all the facts. And as I lay them out, I don't know about you, but as I'm saying them or other people watching, but like naming all of that out loud and like seeing the truth of what's happening for you, like that makes me want to give you a hug. Like that all sounds really hard and painful. Just like period. Like laying all of that out there. And I'm guessing that like that sequence of events is happening for many, many of us right now, or previously, or upcoming. So in my naming that and offering of, you know, this, that like I feel care and affection towards you in that, like can you feel the same love and compassion for yourself that I do? And like, can you step back and see that you are someone who needs and is deserving of rest? Can you step back and see that you are someone who needs and is deserving of connection and care from other people? Can you see that you're reactive because of your hurt, because of the ways that you're hurting in the like tiredness and the loneliness? And then, you know, that sort of like shame spiral where you want to self-punish with even more isolation. Like, ouch! Like, ouch, that hurts. Like, that feels painful. Like, that sequence there. So that in practice, right, of like naming the truth of what is happening and then beginning to orient towards ourselves in a compassionate way, like that practice is radical acceptance. That's what that is right there. So in last week's episode of Dearest Queers, when I was talking to Doolin, I asked him if he knew what unconditional love felt like in their body. Like, did they know how to offer compassion, caring, and kindness towards themselves? Like, do you know what that feels like? And I would, you know, ask you, dear asker of this question, the same question in this moment. Like, do you know what that feels like? Do you know how to conjure that? Do you know how to nurture that in your body? And if not, it's okay, because it's a practice. It's a thing that we like have to nurture and cultivate within ourselves. And for anyone watching, if you don't know or don't feel it, it's okay. Like, feel free to reach out to me, and we can talk about what that practice might look like for you or how to get started in that. I can also get you connected to some resources. I will say that the book called Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach saved my life. And like, I'm not being dramatic. That is a real statement. An excellent book, and it really began to model for me what a compassionate voice and an approach like towards myself, what that looked like. And so I grew up with an extremely critical mother, and like shame was really used as a control tactic in my family, super popular. So my internalized voice of like self-judgment and self-hatred was off the charts, like all caps. I wrote that, off the charts. So orienting towards myself, like with love and a sense of like gentleness and care, like wasn't even on my radar. That was like something that was incredibly unfamiliar to me. And so it's taken me about 10 years of like diligent practice, lots of mindfulness, therapy, loving kindness, like to be able to feel that like source and unconditional love consistently in my body towards myself, which then I can like radiate outwards towards others. And it's an ongoing practice, right? So this is, I feel like most of the things that we've talked about in these videos week by week, they are ongoing practices. That's what we're doing, is we're getting in closer relationship with ourselves, and we are committing to these practices. We're like devoting to what it looks like to show up for ourselves and to love ourselves in these ways. So, and I know because it still happens for me, right? Because it's like part of my conditioning and pattern, as like it's part of my work in this lifetime, is that when I begin to feel sort of tight or constricted or short-tempered or irritable, that like self-judgment, that voice of self-judgment and criticism is the likely source. So how can I soften around that into myself, soften to myself, to begin to like open to that and then move into a place of love or self-compassion? So I just said that we need to practice self-compassion and self-forgiveness, which is true, and we have access to them all the time. This isn't about like, this isn't here and so I need to create this. They're available to us all the time, but many and most of us don't know, like we aren't used to feeling them towards ourselves. We're like much more practiced at feeling them towards like friends, our partners, our pets, or babies, or birds, or like whatever makes you feel like this sort of like sweetness and tenderness. All of those categories make me feel those things. But like oftentimes it's like it just like comes a lot easier to like feel it towards other people. And the real work then is to like how to take that feeling and begin to direct it back home, like back towards ourselves. So holding yourself gently and with kindness for all that's coming up right now. And like find a phrase that feels nurturing to yourself and say that. And I don't know, like this is going to be different for different folks, but like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry you feel so lonely, like I love you, like wow, this is so hard, like just ouch. And like hold yourself with gentleness and care. And there are like physical like acts of care, so like petting your hair, like stroking your cheek, talking to yourself like as if you would want a parent or a lover or a friend to talk to you. And these are all practices that I engage in often. Like I talk to myself all of the time. Like if I'm like, Gemini spinning out in some way or analyzing something, I'll just like very kindly be like, hey, and like bring myself back in like a very kind way. I remind myself all the time that I'm safe. So like these are ways, to begin to practice this with oneself. And as I'm talking about all of this and, and like really directing this love, like if any aversion comes up about relating to yourself in these ways, like don't judge that. Just like notice it as it's coming up. Like as I'm talking about like holding yourself compassionately, like literally, like what does that feel like? Are you like, ew, or like I couldn't do that, or like I just like let my partner do that, or like what's the aversion to like provide those things for yourself? Believe that it isn't possible, you don't want to do it, all of these things. So I would just hold those, because you deserve all of the love in the world. I just want to be really clear about that. So, to wrap this up, dear asker, if your reactivity is hurtful to those you care about, like you are the one responsible for shifting that. But it doesn't diminish your lovability or deservedness of care in any way. In fact, what you're feeling, which is tired and lonely and embarrassed about that, like sounds really painful. So you can take responsibility for shifting those feelings by giving yourself the care that you need, like rest, and reach out for connection, offer yourself self-compassion and love for all of the ways and the things that are hard right now. So forgive yourself for being short-tempered, like not to let yourself off the hook. That's not what self-forgiveness is about, but because judging yourself will only make it worse, and like I can guarantee that. So if you or if anyone watching has questions about how to get started with the practice of self-compassion, please don't hesitate to reach out. I love talking about this stuff. It is like, in my opinion, the root of all of the healing work that we're doing and our ways to show up in the world. So love to have conversations about it. If you know of someone who like needs or would want to hear this message today, I would love for you to share this episode of Dearest Queers with them. You can find me on Instagram at Doolin. Also, I post these on my YouTube channel at the same name, Doolin. And next week, I have a very big announcement about an offering I'm bringing into the world in October. I'm super excited about it. I'm super excited to talk to you all about it. So make sure you catch that next week. And until then, I love you all so much.